Blessed be the Lord my strength, who teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight. We're joined again by the great warrior, Dr. James Fetzer. Jim, it's good to have you on. I know we're going to be jumping into a lot of things. There's some very interesting things that are transpiring at the Democrat National Convention, and Kamala Harris, as I mentioned too prior to the show, Ukraine has outlawed the Russian Orthodox Church. This is going to create a hurricane of religious animosity inside Ukraine against this Zelensky Poroshenko agenda to paganize Ukraine. And of course, Iran is continuing to say to Israel that their response is coming, and keeping Israel on edge and in a state of nervous, frantic worry and concern. So there's a lot happening. But Jim, I'll hand it to you to kick us off. What do we have?
Oh, Scott, you're absolutely right about a lot happening. We got the president of Belarus warning that Ukraine is trying to tempt Russia into using tactical nuclear weapons that would then justify a massive response by NATO. In an interview, Lukashenko warned Kiev's operation in the Kursk region, the largest cross-border assault by Kiev since the outbreak, posed enormous risks to global security. The danger is that this kind of escalation on the part of Ukraine is an attempt to push Russia into asymmetric action, for example, the use of nuclear weapons, which would be a PR bonanza for both Kiev and his backers. Then we'd probably have no allies left, no sympathetic countries left at all. He also responded to a statement by Ukrainian officials that the Kursk incursion was aimed at improving Kiev's diplomatic position for possible talks with Russia. This plan is a classic, but doesn't work in a struggle against a great empire that has not even begun to fight in earnest. That he was sure Ukraine would eventually be expelled from Kursk. It's already happened. Russia, given its current doctrine, can only deploy its nuclear arsenal in response to the use of nukes by others, or if conventional weapons threaten the existence of the state. It's a very conservative and responsible position. Putin has said on occasion there's no need to use nukes, but has warned that it may change its doctrine in what it perceives to be escalation by NATO. Meanwhile, Ukraine destroyed a Russian bridge with Western-made missiles, HIMARS. It's embarrassing. For the first time, the Kursk region was hit by Western-made rocket launchers, probably American HIMARS, Maria Zakharova reported. As a result, the bridge was completely destroyed. Volunteers who were assisting evacuation of civilians were killed. Another bridge was reportedly hit by the U.S.-provided weapons. The ground incursion came a few months after the Biden admin gave Ukraine a green light to use U.S.-provided missiles and strikes inside of Russia, which, of course, makes America a very direct complicit and a target for Russia. Times reported the U.S. is effectively blocking Ukraine from using British-provided Storm Shadow missiles, which have a range of about 155 miles. But look at this. Biden's now considering sending longer-range cruise missiles to Ukraine. This would be a tremendous mistake. The Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile has a range of over 230 miles, would become the longest-range weapon the U.S. sends if it goes ahead with a delivery. Final decision not yet made. Ukraine has received some U.S.-made F-16s, which can be nuclear capable, and which Russia has reported will be treated as such. Russia is ready, we hear reports, to execute nuclear attacks on NATO targets according to leaked documents. Citing documents from Western security sources, Putin allegedly has sought to enable the Russian Navy to execute nuclear strikes within NATO territory where a conflict to emerge. But of course, targets would not solely be military. There could be hundreds, if not thousands, mapped across Europe, including military and infrastructure. Russia is evidently still capable of transporting nuclear weapons on surface ships. Possible targets include the west coast of France, military installation in Norway, Germany, Estonia, the British port town of Barrow-in-Furness, known for its production of nuclear submarines. They see tactical nukes and potentially war-winning weapons, said Jeffrey Lewis of Middlebury Institute for International Studies. They're going to want to use them, and they're going to want to use them pretty quickly should the decision be made. Scott, I don't think Putin wants to do that, but the West is forcing his hand.
Well, I did an interview last Thursday in which I said Russia's nuclear doctrine is well known, that they will use tactical nuclear weapons and any nuclear weapons if they are, number one, invaded and the territorial integrity of Russia is violated, or two, nuclear weapons are to be used against them. And they were invaded on the Kursk invasion when the Ukrainian forces, taking their orders from the US CIA and other NATO elements, invaded and killed Russian civilians with orders to shoot Russian civilian men in the leg and kill any Russian civilian men with guns. Again, this is a remarkable thing. Take this. This is almost like Mexico. If Mexico had invaded Texas, saying any Texan with a gun you kill, and any Texan man you shoot in the legs and throw him in the basement. This is what Ukraine tried to do and was ordered to do in invading Russia. So they invaded Russia, which Russia could have used tactical nuclear weapons to respond with, but they didn't. And I did an interview and I said, this is why they were planning this. They were hoping that Russia would set off a nuclear tactical weapon. They're hoping to set off the Zaporozhye plant to try and trigger a cascade, an avalanche of negative public stigma, public relations, global outrage against Russia for using nuclear weapons based on the sensitivities of the world and NATO. But Russia hasn't fallen into that trap. They're not going to use nuclear weapons. They don't need to. They have superior kinetic weapons in their hypersonic missiles and in the various personnel and military technology they already have. So they don't need nuclear weapons. But it shows the desperation, both the madness of Ukraine and the desperation of NATO and the United States and elsewhere. And I think they're doing it again to try and trigger this avalanche to facilitate the final implosion of the United States. As odd as it sounds, and I think you and I are in agreement, and a lot of the people that we talk with are, they are throwing a bomb over in Ukraine, hoping that the explosion of that and the shrapnel of that can be used to set off similar events in America, false flags that they can then translate into a police state, police power, suspension of the American election, and all sorts of other things. I see that as their real agenda, is the attempt to translate America into a police state empire. And the only way they can do it is through civil insurrection or foreign a foreign war, or both. And I think they're getting neither, of course, Jim.
Very good. There are also reports, of course, of Ukraine planning to set off a dirty bomb in relation to one of the nuclear plants that would bring in NATO, because NATO's already declared if there's any evidence of nuclear contamination, they'd regard that as a justification to attack Russia. Meanwhile, Israel has stunned the world by saying the US, UK, and France would assist in an offensive strike on Iran when the countries have not made any such claims. This is by the foreign minister, Israel Katz, claiming he expects, now mind you, he expects, that's not saying the other countries have declared, but that he expects not only the US, but also Britain and France to assist in offensive operations against Iran should it attack Israel. He was invoking the U.S. as its example. The U.S.-led coalition will join Israel not only in defense, but in an attack against significant targets of Iran, clearly without the authorization of those nations. It's yet unclear whether even Washington has signed on to this. When on April 13th, Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones, it is true U.S. fighter jets helped intercept many, as did from Jordan. Cost them about $1 billion to offset the attack when all of the Iranian hypersonic missiles hit their targets. Israel cannot respond strongly to attacks upon it. Very odd he says that. It's going to be the case that Iran, which has already declared its intention to respond to the assassination of the Hamas negotiator in Tehran, has the right under Article 51 of the UN Charter to take a military action against Iran, which the Secretary General has acknowledged. Yet Israeli media have said, perhaps softening the official read-up, they omitted the sentence about retaliation by the other nations. U.S. and Western allies have so far only engaged in offensive strikes on the Houthis in Yemen, who are doing a brilliant job. Meanwhile, a senior White House national security official warned Iran of cataclysmic consequences if the Islamic Republic attacks Israel. That seems to imply the U.S. would subject Iran to a nuclear attack. This is a bad idea. The senior official said the U.S. would encourage the Iranians, and I know many are, not to move down the road of attacking Israel because the consequences could be cataclysmic, particularly for Iran. According to the New York Times, Iran is delaying its reprisal to allow Gaza's ceasefire negotiations to make progress. But Netanyahu has made it very clear he does not want a ceasefire. Meanwhile, a former Iranian diplomat, Amir al-Mousavi, has told al-Mayadeen Iran has been threatened with a nuclear strike and would be capable of responding with a proportional response. That means Iran has nukes. Scott, I'm convinced that's the message that was being telegraphed here. It's very significant because Israel is a very small country. And even if Iran only has a couple of nukes, which would be my guess, that's more than enough to obliterate Israel. It's a bad situation for Israel. They have overplayed their hand.
Well, they're not a reasonable country or a reasonable people, Jim. There's a fanatical Zionist madness. There's an insanity. There's an arrogance that defies all reason, all human empathy. The Israeli Zionist Talmudist arrogance of claiming or believing that they're somehow superior to every other human being, that somehow the Goyim have one soul, but the Talmudic Zionist has two. You're dealing with a psychotic people and a psychotic government, and this psychotic Netanyahu is engaged in this as depicted in his genocide of the Palestinians. This is reverberating still. It's taken a long time. And I said from the very beginning in November of 2023, the entire world should stand up against Israel and form a flotilla of naval ships going to Palestine, setting up their own international embassies along the Gaza area and establishing, okay, China has this 5 miles of the Gaza Strip. Russia has this 5 miles. Saudi Arabia has this 5 miles. Iran has this 5 miles. Indonesia has this 5 miles. Claiming ownership would have stopped a lot of this by putting Israel in a defensive position, but they never did that. And now you see them again lying by claiming that the West is going to step in. I don't think they are, and I just did a Press TV interview, and I was asked about this. I do not believe the American people or the French people or the British people or any people in Europe are going to go to war, give their money, give their weapons, give their sons and daughters to Israel to fight Iran because of their religious bigotry. There's no difference between Iran wanting to fight and kill every Iranian. Let me say that again. There's no difference between Israel wanting to fight Iran and destroy every Iranian as Israel currently wants to fight Palestine and kill every Palestinian. So they're not going to get European people to kill Palestinians, nor are they going to get Europeans or Americans to kill Iranians. And Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden or Trump or anybody that believes that America or Western civilization and the people are going to go to war over Israel's genocide are completely psychotic. They're gone. There's a mental break. I don't know how to describe it, but the nuclear issue, Iran, like Russia, is not looking to set off a nuclear exchange. They don't need to. And Israel, if it tries to engage in a nuclear event, the question is Iran going to respond with nuclear weapons? Is Russia going to respond, or are they going to use other weapons and completely annihilate Israel? And how is Turkey and Yemen and all these countries going to respond? They're going to, cut down the tree from all sides. So I think we're very much going to witness this year Israel in a final collapse as the state once again disintegrates into the sea of time. And what will emerge is a scattering of Jewish, Palestinian, and Christian tribes in that region. Jim?
Oh, I concur, Scott, that the end of Israel is nigh. Meanwhile, there's a potential for Trump being imprisoned before the election. I believe it's going to take place.
After a jury found Donald Trump guilty on 34 felony counts in his New York hush money trial, the judge is set to announce his sentence on July 11th.
The judge was a tyrant.
So could Trump merely receive a fine or probation, or could he join his former CFO behind bars at Rikers Island? Here's a look at the potential sentencing outcomes and how they could be impacted by the appeals process and the 2024 election. First, each of the 34 counts that Trump was found guilty of carries up to 4 years in prison, but there are several reasons why Trump could get a more lenient sentence. At age 77, he's a first-time offender with no criminal record. The felonies he was convicted of are low-level, non-violent crimes. And since he's a former president running for office again, the judge may not want to set a precedent by locking him up. That's why it's entirely possible that the judge could impose a fine or give Trump probation, which would require Trump to report to New York City's probation department. Still, legal experts say a prison sentence isn't off the table. And Justice Juan Merchan had already threatened to put Trump behind bars when he violated his gag order 10 times. If the sentence is shorter than 1 year, Trump could end up in New York City's Rikers Island. Former corrections officials say it's possible he could go to the West facility, where there is plenty of room for him and his Secret Service detail. Originally constructed for inmates with communicable diseases, the facility is now known for holding high-profile inmates, like disgraced Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein and former Trump Organization CFO Allen Weisselberg. In the event he receives a sentence longer than a year, Trump would most likely serve time in a New York State facility. Regardless of the punishment, Trump would still be eligible to run for and become president. Even if the judge sentences Trump to prison, Trump could ask for bail pending appeal to stay out of custody while he challenges the conviction.
So we're going to be appealing this scam.
The appeals process could take more than a year to resolve. And if Trump wins in November, it's highly unlikely he'd have to go to prison while serving as president. Though he wouldn't be able to pardon himself since the president's pardon power doesn't apply to state convictions.
That was a very good objective report, but it's entirely possible this judge, in an injustice, not a justice, Merchan will actually sentence him. I anticipate that to happen. The Dems may well be plotting a nasty October surprise, weaponizing the court system yet again against Trump. A nasty surprise would be unsurprising, given the entire trial against him has been nothing short of a total sham, with devastating consequences for the forthcoming election. After all, if he is incarcerated, how can he run his campaign? The story nobody's talking about, thus, is that Trump could face more judicial harassment before the commencement of early voting. Specifically, you noted that Judge Merchan, who has rather obvious links to the Democratic Party, may sentence Trump just before the election. Straight to jail. Judging from your suggestions, it could become the fact. It seems he's racing to sentence Trump as quickly as possible. He could have exercised discretion and changed the sentencing date, but instead he moved it closer to the beginning of absentee voting in my home state in Pennsylvania. In other words, this is an election interference scam, which is what was going on from the beginning. Could you imagine what will happen if Merchant sentenced Trump to jail time, even though he's a first-time nonviolent offender? What if he went even crazier and said Trump doesn't get to stay out of jail while his case is on appeal? He has the power to actually order Trump to jail immediately. I think it's more than likely he will do precisely that. After all, Trump was convicted of 34 felonies based on the testimony of a apparent perjurer, and the felonies were nonsensical. Meanwhile, Bragg has made a move that some are interpreting as protecting the Democrat Party. Here's a tweet. DA Bragg does not oppose Trump's request to delay sentencing, deferring to Judge Merchant. They note the new complex effect of the Supreme Court's immunity ruling for actions taken while in the performance of his duty. Another, this is Bragg trying to protect Democrats from any possible backlash. Incredibly transparent. Meanwhile, remember, there's mounting evidence there was a real plot to assassinate Trump in Butler, even though he got wind of it and flipped the script. The heads of the Secret Service, FBI, and Homeland Security have all declined to testify in the House about the shooting of former President Donald Trump because they were engaged in a conspiracy to kill him. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they are going to sentence him to jail on that sentencing day. I think Merchan is going to do it before the election. I don't think we're going to have an election, first of all. I think they're going to do this as soon as possible. And I think Merchan, despite these silly legal reasonings of he's a first-time offender and the sentencing guidelines, say no jail time, all of that is bullshit. The court and the judge can do whatever he wants. The judge can stand up on a soapbox and say, in the interest of democracy and the preservation of the law of the United States, and in order to show future generations that no president is above the law, I have to make a decision. And I therefore will make you an example to all presidents, and you will be going to jail for the next year or two, or who knows. But he will be put into jail at his sentencing if he survives that long. And if he goes into jail, I don't doubt that they may try and kill him in jail. And to think that he couldn't go into jail is really another asinine miscalculation, because he is the president of the United States, formerly, but every meal he has, every drink of water he has to be tested to make sure it's not poisoned by the Secret Service. He can't be around anyone who does not, the Secret Service surround him entirely. He's not around to be around anyone. So this whole thing, I think, is spelling a disastrous perfect storm where you're going to have a corrupt judge, the Democrats, these corrupt Soros prosecutors unleash, lawfare and do everything they can to incarcerate and kill him. I think it's leading us towards a civil war, because if what people are seeing done to Trump, they are internalizing and saying, you're doing it to me, because everyone knows this entire court case was completely false, fabricated nonsense. From the rape of that ugly old Skigsian witch. If you're going to accuse a president of alleged sexual misconduct, why not prosecute Bill Clinton, who has volumes of those sorts of abuses? So the hypocrisy is absolutely wretched. But this is very alarming on a lot of different levels, Jim.
Yes, Scott, excellent commentary. Of course, we even have evidence that Hillary and Hugh Abbott murdered a young girl in a sex torture and adrenaline crime. Trump campaign just dropped a compilation video of Kamala. Anyone who thinks that this woman has the intellectual ability to serve as president, just consider the following.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making. Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
So you're now no longer are you necessarily keeping those private files in some file cabinet that's locked in the basement of the house. It's on your laptop, and it's then therefore up here in this cloud that exists above us, right?
The Caribbean nations, island nations, in the Western Hemisphere, that is where the Caribbean is. We are also in the Western Hemisphere. They are our neighbors. I am here, standing here on the northern flank, on the eastern flank, talking about what we have in terms of the eastern flank. I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been, you know?
Space is exciting.
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree that there are things and tools that are available to us to slow this thing down. We will work together and continue to work together to address these issues, to tackle these challenges, and to work together as we continue to work.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you're just, like, if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend.
Yes.
And then, the little thing catches it. And then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more.
Do you know, okay, a bit of a history lesson. Do you know that the women's teams were not allowed to have brackets until 2022?
So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea.
AI is kind of a fancy thing. It's, first of all, it's 2 letters. It means artificial intelligence.
Wow. Meanwhile, as Dave Hodges asks, is it possible to fix stupid before November? Democrats are screaming vote for Kamala because she's a woman. Yet they can't define what a woman is. Dozens show up to a Harris campaign event in North Carolina to hear her economic plan. This is one where they didn't have a rock musician to draw in a big group. The media construct around the political campaign of Kamala Harris took a big hit when Harris held a campaign event in Raleigh, North Carolina, but did not have a big-name music star to bring in the crowds. As a result, only a few dozen supporters showed up to hear the preliminary economic plan of Kamala Harris. The official crowd size was listed at 109 participants, including media, as Kamala read for a teleprompter for the event. Harris has pled price controls for groceries, which will drive up the price of groceries. She's pled $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers, which will drive the price of housing, and she has pledged to use taxpayer funds to build 5 million residential housing units for illegal aliens. Meanwhile, pallets of bricks have been delivered ahead in Chicago, and Antifa is preparing for a summer of rage. It hasn't broken out yet, Scott, but I won't be surprised if it were to begin as early as tonight. There you see them, sitting available for convenience of Antifa, BLM, and other rioters who are going to create mayhem, I predict. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that you're right, Jim. This is the time to kind of start the stopwatch and start your video recorders and get your calendars out and say, as of 8/20/2024, all's well. There's no riots, there's no burnings, there's no repeats of Minneapolis, there's no repeats of Black Lives Matter, Compton fires, or riots, or things like that. But we need to be prepared to mark on the calendar when these things start. And you will see, I believe, an amplification when they start. I believe you'll have an amplification that will only grow and grow and grow and metastasize and ripple and begin to invade and cause all sorts of chaos in suburban areas. I do not think, as much as I wish I was wrong, I do not think this is going to be acquiesced or be calmed in weeks or months. I think the globalist powers, Democrat powers, whoever you want to call them, who are going to be behind the riots and the violence, are going to use this to try to destabilize the United States in general, issue in martial law, and suspend the elections. This sort of smoke screen creates opportunities for assassinations, false flags. They could even bring in mercenaries and say that Russia did it. I think we're just about to have the horses break out of the gate, and you're going to have the most violent time in the history of the United States. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
I'm afraid I agree with you, Scott. Meanwhile, lots of questions, oddities about this convention. I'm watching on television and the stands are just jammed. But in this case, there are lots of empty seats. Nobody cares about Kamala Harris. It appears there are more people outside protesting than inside attending the DNC convention. Monday's theme, for the people. This is after Kamala forced Joe off the ballot. Actually, he died, stole all his delegates, and took his donor money. The Democrat told millions who voted for Joe their votes didn't matter. Lots of empty seats on day one. Nobody cares about Kamala after she stole Joe's delegates. What an embarrassing moment for the Democrats. Nobody showed up to the DNC convention. They're losing their minds. Here's another report. Low energy, less than half full. Check it out. Here's an actual camera inside.
Resist those attacks collectively, and we will stand together.
I don't know exactly what stand, but here she's not doing any interviews. Listen to this attempt to defend her.
She's the sitting vice president of the United States. A traveling press pool is with her at all times. That's why you do not see the majority of those in the media who are asking her for an interview, because they can speak to her at all times. Number two, Number two, the most important interview she's doing is with the American people. And that's why you see the polls responding the way they are in terms of who they prefer being the next leader of the free world.
I give you points for spin.
The polls are going to decide who the next president of the United States is.
The people are, and the people have not heard any answers from her on anything.
Well,
she's actually not answering questions from voters either. She's answering questions from nobody.
So who's going to decide the next nominee, the media or the people?
Well, the nominee
who would you rather interview with?
The nominee was not decided by your party's voters.
Who would you rather interview with for November?
You just asked me a question. Who's going to decide the next nominee? Yeah. Your party voted for a nominee and then threw him out by the elites. So that's already
not true. He decided to step aside and gave the opportunity for Kamala Harris to be our nominee.
All of his own volition.
I tell you what, guys.
14 million votes.
In the house that Michael Jordan built here at the United Center. You're right, Guy. That was some spin, Antoine.
Some spin indeed. Meanwhile, look at the real factors. The economy, Trump beats Kamala 56 to 43. Inflation 61 to 38. Border issues 76 to 24. These are the most important issues before the public. Meanwhile, I thought Michelle Obama might be floated in, but here she was last night. And Scott, she looks terrible. She's not wearing a wig. It's obvious this is a man who has floppy breasts. I'm very embarrassed. No one would think this were a woman. And remember, she seemed to exemplify this ancient satanic figure, Behemoth, who has both male genitals and female breasts. That appears to be Michelle Obama. Your thoughts, my friend?
Michelle Obama, being a man, of course, has been brought out by Joan Rivers, who was then soon after mysteriously killed. I think all of the photographic evidence and the video evidence confirms the appendage of a penis between his legs. These artificial breasts. I think in that video, in that picture, you see the abnormality. The strangeness in the chest. The political games, and I'm glad you showed the video of the people not filling up the seats in the stadium. That's really where the hope and the reason is. And I don't mean to sound negative, and I never want people to think I'm negative or I want them to be negative. We win on every level. We don't back down from anyone. We are the United States American patriots, the conservatives, the Republicans, the libertarians. There isn't even a few blue dog Democrats. The country is awakening to common sense, I think, like never before, because of the poison, the toxicity, the stupidity of wokeness and climate change and homosexuality and transgenderism and telling girls they can be guys and guys they can be girls and men going into women's locker rooms. The whole country is tired and sick of that, and they're angry about it. But most of the American people don't voice that anger. They don't get expressive, but they do when they pull the lever of a vote. And I think overwhelmingly, as we go towards the vote, I hope and pray that people in every county, in every state, demand and will not back down and say, nope, election day is November, 7th, and that's when we're showing up, and that's when we're voting in our county and in our state, and we're not doing it by electronic means. We're doing it by paper ballots, dipping our finger in the purple ink if we need to, but we are not backing down. And as you cast your vote, you declare Donald Trump is the overwhelming victor, and we will not accept fraud or a stolen election ever again. And if it requires a Jefferson Davis, Abraham Lincoln Civil War split, so be it. If it requires a violent revolution in this country to preserve the Republican form of government and our rights and everything that was established in 1776, never mind the incorporation of America, but getting back to 1776, then so be it. There are times when men and women and boys and girls need to stand up with violent opposition towards tyrants and towards anyone that tries to police and advance tyranny. So we win all the time. No one should ever submit or surrender or allow the Democrat bully or the media's propaganda to get the better of them. We know Donald Trump is not perfect. We know he's got some wrong ideas in many ways. Maybe he's playing as many cards as he can to win the Jews. Yeah, I'm going to help Israel, so he gets the money from the Jews in America. Yeah, I'm going to stand up to Putin, so he gets a lot of the Catholic animosity that hates Russia because it's the Russian Orthodox Church. Whatever he's doing to play and to get people to support him, I understand. But when he gets into office, that's when I want to see a Ronald Reagan departure from the endless war syndrome that Bush and Cheney and everybody put us down. So the most important thing is for people not to lose heart, not to lose hope, and do not surrender to the propaganda or the bullying or the election manipulation, which we know they're going to bring. So I want to impress upon people, gird your loins and be prepared in your mind to say, no, no, no. Donald Trump won. He's my president, and no one else is. And I'll finally end it this way, Jim. Kamala Harris is not a natural-born citizen. She was not born to an American parent. And if you do not have an American parent, you are not natural born. And if you're not natural born, you cannot be president of the United States. You can be vice president, but you cannot be president of the United States unless you have one parent who is an American citizen. That's what makes you natural born. And she is not. So every American needs to affirm she is not qualified to be president, and we do not recognize her as president. Jim?
It's a very serious point, which I believe is true. Meanwhile, the House dropped its Biden impeachment report, and it's damning. If he weren't already dead, I think there might be reason to think he could be impeached yet. The report describes in detail its abuse of power, foreign entanglement, corruption, and obstruction of investigations. House Oversight, Ways and Means and Judiciary brought their nearly year-long impeachment probe to an end Monday, concluding the Democrat, who unwittingly made Kamala Harris' second presidential bid possible, is engaged in egregious and impeachable offenses. According to the nearly 300-page report, overwhelming evidence demonstrates Biden participated in a conspiracy to monetize his office of public trust to enrich his family. Among other aspects, the Biden family and their business associates received tens of millions from foreign interests by leading them to believe such payment would provide them access to an influence with President Biden. Bank records show that when accounting for the Biden family associates and their companies, the international influence peddling scheme totaled over $27 million from foreign sources just between 2014 and 2023. Contrary to repeated suggestion by Biden and boosters that he had no hand in his son's shady dealings with Ukraine, China, Russia, Kazakhstan, or elsewhere, the report maintained Biden knowingly participated. That it's inconceivable. President Biden did not understand he was taking part in an effort to enrich his family by abusing his office of public trust. In August 2019, he said, "I've never discussed with my son, brother, or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses," which was false. The following month, he said, "I've never spoken to my son about his oversight business dealings," which was false. Days after indicating he stood by the previous provocations, he noted on October 15th, "I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. No one has indicated I have. We've always kept everything separate," which was false. Biden made similar denials on at least a dozen other occasions. Despite his protests, the report indicates no such distance existed. Some of the proceeding from the influence peddling scheme indeed went to Joe himself. Among the funds that ended in his bank account, hundreds of thousands were allegedly directly traceable to China. Biden's exhibited conduct and taken actions that the founders sought to guard against in drafting the impeachment provisions in the Constitution. The report indicates his active participation was sometimes expressed in policy changes, evinced by the leveraging of $1 billion U.S. loan guarantee to Ukraine to secure a result favorable to a company affiliated with his son, convicted felon Hunter Biden. Not only does the report accuse Biden and his ilk of engaging in the conspiracy, they did their best to cover it up. Foreign money was transmitted to the Biden family through complicated financial transactions. The Biden family laundered funds through intermediate entities, broke up large transactions into numerous smaller. Substantial efforts were made to hide President Biden's involvement in his family's business activities. House Democrats may be prickled to learn precedents they set in 2019 in their impeachment of President Trump have been turned on Biden. Meanwhile, on the positive side, the Supreme Court has upheld a block on the entirety of the federal government new Title IX gender rules. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to reject the federal government's bid to enforce its Title IX rule in 10 Republican-led states. In a ruling handed down on August 16, they left intact 2 separate lower court orders blocking the entirety of the rule in Louisiana and 9 other states. At the center are 3 provisions, which include one declaring the existing federal law against sex-based discrimination in education prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The rule also addresses gender pronouns in sex-separate spaces like bathrooms, locker rooms, and shower areas, clarifying colleges and schools could lose federal funding if they don't address students by their preferred pronouns or allow them to use facilities corresponding to their gender identity rather than their biological sex. The federal government had asked the court to partially lift those orders, a relief that would sever the 3 key provisions by allowing the other unchallenged part to go into effect. 4 justices would have let that happen, but the full bench agreed the key changes the government had sought to implement, including the redefinition of sex-based discrimination to include gender identity and restrictions on maintained sex-separated spaces, should remain blocked. Scott.
Well, it's important to remember when it says the federal government trying to apply its Title IX rules, it's not the federal government, it is the Biden administration. The Biden administration, the executive branch, is in the Department of Justice and all of these federal agencies, illegitimately, I might add. He's not the real president. He's never been the president. He's been fraudulently inserted. We're in a state of a coup d'etat, but they're trying to push radical ideas that boys can pretend they're girls and go into girls' locker rooms and violate the rights of girls, violate their college scholarships by competing in sports. This is single-handedly the greatest abomination this country has ever experienced, and it's amazing to me that this decision is so close, 5-4. And that shows you have 4 judges that are absolute worthless pieces of shit, psychotic, agenda-driven fools. This should have been 8-1, but it 5-4. 4 judges that back this radical insanity that you can cut off your penis or glue one on and call yourself a man and add hormone blockers and suddenly you're a man or you're a woman. Is an absolute confirmation of the death of this country if it continues. All of these judges have to be tarred and feathered and ran out by any means necessary. Jim?
Why don't you tell us what you really think, Scott? Meanwhile, there's been some developments in my legal case, including an interview with SGT report about all the evidence I have to substantiate my claim that the judge ought to be recused because he was in collusion with the Posner attorneys to deny me of my constitutional rights under color of law.
Did you see this man in that court in Madison, Wisconsin?
Oh, sure. And of course, during the oral deposition, I was there the whole time. That took over 3 hours. And when the trial for damages, he was in the courtroom with me too. He was there at the table for the plaintiff.
Okay, so this man, purported to be Leonard Posner, was in Madison, Wisconsin, in court with Fetzer. But then 60 Minutes peddles this guy out and tells the American people that's Leonard Posner? Is that what you're saying? Did that actually air on 60 Minutes? Did they ever broadcast?
Oh, sure. Absolutely, 100%. Yes, it did.
Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so very much for click and play. Sean from SGT Report here. That was my friend Dr. James Fetzer, another persecuted patriot. He joins a long list of patriots now being persecuted by a criminal government. Dr. Fetzer is being persecuted for daring to question what happened at Sandy Hook Elementary in December of 2012. And this one has a couple of absolutely mind-blowing moments in it. Information that you've never heard that will make you think, this has to be an episode of Black Mirror. Buckle up. I think this is an extremely important broadcast, and I thank you for tuning in. Before we
Meanwhile, the first book on my case is now appeared by Ronald F. Avery. The judicial blundering that Dr. James H. Fetzer, co-editor and co-author of the book Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. This is a logical critique of the summary judgment process used to find Dr. Fetzer liable for defamation and the ongoing procedures used to take his intellectual property and garnish his wife's tax returns. His wife is not involved in the lawsuit. The critique is based on the informed opinion of Ronald Avery, who's familiar with many of the court documents in the case. The analysis covers the circuit or trial court rulings in all appellate levels, including the U.S. Supreme Court. Ron has a blog about my stuff with most of the documents, Scott. He's very clear. He's dealt himself with summary judgment issues in Texas, and I'm extremely pleased to have this book now available to the public. Your thoughts?
Well, I just say, Jim, you've done extraordinary work in this area. Your revelations about Sandy Hook, I remember the report. I remember looking at all the videos and the photographs, and some of the things that stood out most poignantly were the actors that were present, especially the actor that presented to be a SWAT team member carrying his weapon upside down, holding it by the magazine, which no one in the military or the police would ever do. The revelations that these children were being lined up for photographic walks and then reorganized in different ways for secondary photographs. That doesn't show an emergency of children being rushed out of a classroom. This shows a theater, a drama, and of course all of the FEMA materials and signs and water and pizza boxes and all of the things, and that school being shut down originally beforehand, being more of a storage space. The classes filled with books and empty desks and books like it was a storage facility. Those are not real schools, and all the cars being parked in exactly the same direction, on and on and on. I think it represents the greatest fraud upon this country that was designed for weapons, outlawing the AK-47 assault rifle. That's always been their agenda, is arms control and cutting back the Second Amendment. But I think you'll prevail if you are continuing to fight this and demand that fraud upon the court has been committed and that all of the evidence has to be seen and tried by a jury of your peers. And at the end of the day, that jury will see that the overwhelming evidence of truth is on your side, while the deception and the fraud has been committed by not only this Posner, but everyone else associated with it. And it should be enjoined as a federal racketeering fraud case as well, from all the money that was given to this Newtown, Connecticut.
And I'm so grateful to you, Scott, for emphasizing the concept of deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law, which fits this case to a T.
Yes, indeed. Jim Fetzer, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on Great Awakenings. We will see you next time, and thank you for your support. Again, if you are in need of the Indian black salve, the cancer destroying medicinal element that we have, go to destroy-cancer.com. Takes about 15 to 30 days to get to you. That's we're back order, but we're getting it out. So make sure you go to destroy-cancer.com. If you haven't got any of that, we've got photographs being uploaded to the site about its effects. And if you want any of the videos that we do with Dr. Fetzer, you can go to greatawakeningstv.com, and we'll load everything up there on our Rumble page. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time, Jim. God bless you. Good night.